It wasn't the cold that made Henry's hands shake that night. It was what his daughter didn't say as she shut the garage door behind her. He stood there, stiff in the dim light of the single bulb hanging above. The air smelled like motor oil and cardboard. A deflated air mattress leaned against the wall, and next to it was an old recliner, not even his, but something they probably meant to throw away. Blankets are in the bin, her voice had echoed. Then the door shut. No kiss. No goodnight. No, Dad, I'm glad you're here. Just the hollow sound of the lock turning. Henry stood still for a long moment, breathing fog into the air. He'd driven 6 hours to get here, gripping the wheel until his knuckles hurt, only stopping once for gas and a burnt coffee. The road had blurred. His eyes weren't what they used to be, but he didn't say that when she called. He'd said, "Of course, honey. I'll come stay. I'd love to see the kids." The kids. He hadn't seen them yet. He shuffled toward the recliner, every step echoing on the concrete floor. He lowered himself carefully, his knees stiff, his back sore from the drive. He reached for the bin, pulled out the blanket. It was thin, the kind you throw on a couch, not the kind meant for shelter. He wrapped it around himself anyway. Outside, the wind howled like it knew something he didn't. Once, Henry had built homes. Dozens of them. He was a contractor for 35 years. Nails, beams, sheetrock. He knew how to make a house sturdy, how to keep it warm in the winter and cool in the summer. His hands, now trembling, once shaped rooms where families laughed. His own home had been sold 2 months ago, after Marla died. He couldn't keep up the mortgage, not alone. The yard had gone wild, and the water heater broke. His knees couldn't handle the stairs. So when his daughter, Caroline, had said, "Come live with us for a while, until you figure something out," he'd thought maybe there'd still be space for him somewhere. But now, here he was, in a garage. The next morning, the garage door rolled open with a screech. Caroline stood there, coffee in hand, not looking at him. "You want to come in for breakfast?" she asked, already turning away. Henry forced a smile. "Sure." He followed her inside, moving slowly. The house smelled of bacon and toast. The walls were covered in photos of her family, her husband Jim, the kids, Maddie, 12, and Caleb, 10. None of him. He sat at the edge of the table. Maddie looked up from her cereal. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hey, sweetheart," he said, heart lifting. Caroline placed a single plate in front of him. "No eggs, just toast." "I wasn't sure if you were awake," she mumbled. Jim didn't speak. He nodded once and kept reading the paper. Henry chewed in silence. That afternoon, Caroline handed him a small list. "Could you maybe fix the back gate? It sticks. And the porch light, it's been out for a while." He looked at the paper. Of course. He wanted to feel useful. Needed. In the garage, he found a dusty toolbox. Some screws were rusted. Still, he worked. The gate creaked, but he got it to swing. He climbed the ladder carefully to reach the porch light. He spent all day fixing things around a house that wasn't his. That night, it snowed. The garage wasn't insulated. He lay curled on the recliner, the blanket pulled to his chin. His bones ached. The cold wasn't sharp, it was dull and cruel, sinking into joints and marrow. He thought of Marla. She used to tuck an extra quilt around him, saying, "You need it more than I do, you old thing." Her laugh was soft like music. He missed the sound. 3 days passed, then a week. He was never invited to sit on the couch in the evenings. Never asked how he was doing. The kids smiled at him. Sometimes that helped. But Caroline always looked distracted. And Jim never really looked at him at all. He wasn't sure if they resented him or just forgot he was there. One evening, Maddie came into the garage. She was holding a small tin. "I made these at school," she whispered. "You want one?" He opened the tin. "Sugar cookies. A little burnt." "They're perfect," he said, voice cracking. She sat beside him. "Why don't you come watch movies with us?" He smiled. "Your mom might not want that." She didn't say anything, but she leaned against his shoulder for a while. He didn't realize he was crying until she said softly, "It's okay to miss Grandma. I miss her too." The next morning, Jim stepped into the garage. "We need to talk," he said. Henry stood, wary. Jim rubbed the back of his neck. "This isn't working." Caroline stressed. "The kids, they need space. We were thinking maybe you could look at other options." Henry nodded slowly. "You want me to leave?" Jim didn't reply. The silence was worse than shouting. Henry packed what little he had. 2 shirts. A framed photo of Marla. No one helped. No one stopped him. The last thing Maddie said to him was, "I don't want you to go." He hugged her close. "I know, sweet girl," he whispered. "But sometimes people show love differently." As he drove away, he didn't look back. But the warmth in his chest from that cookie tin and one soft shoulder stayed with him long after the road blurred again. The bus ride south was long and quiet. Henry sat by the window, his duffel bag tucked beneath his knees, hands resting on top. Outside, gray fields passed by under a pale sky. Every so often, he'd catch a glimpse of his reflection-tired eyes, white stubble, skin that seemed thinner than it had been even last month. He wasn't sure exactly where he was going. There wasn't a plan, just a direction. Warmer, maybe. He'd heard of shelters downstate. Some better than others. Somewhere he could lay low and figure things out. Somewhere he wouldn't be an imposition. He leaned back in the plastic seat and tried to imagine what Marla would have said if she were here. She wouldn't have let him sit in that garage to begin with. She'd have said something, loudly, with a sharp tongue and soft eyes. "Don't let them treat you like some forgotten suitcase, Henry," he could almost hear her say. "You're still someone, still worth something." But the truth was, he wasn't sure anymore. In the next town, he got off at a corner diner. The air smelled of grease and coffee. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a grilled cheese and a cup of tea. He counted the coins before handing them over. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes but a kind smile, looked at him carefully. "You just passing through?" "Something like that," he replied. She refilled his tea twice without charging. Said nothing more. But when he left, she slid a paper bag into his hands, 2 muffins and a plastic fork. "I overbaked," she said, winking. "Happens." Henry smiled, his throat tight. "Thanks." That night, he slept on a park bench wrapped in his coat. The wind bit at his cheeks, but he didn't complain. He'd learned, long ago, that silence hurt less than asking for what wouldn't come. A man in a blue hoodie passed by at 2 a.m., handed him a blanket without stopping. No words, just a nod. The next morning, Henry found the shelter. It was a red brick building behind a church, run by a woman named Doris who wore clogs and carried a clipboard like a weapon. "You sober?" she asked, not unkindly. "Yes, ma'am." "Heart meds?" "Yes, ma'am." "All right. You get a cot for 3 nights, then we reevaluate." She showed him to a thin mattress in a room with 6 others. The smell of bleach and body odor clung to the air, but the heat was on. And for the first time in weeks, he slept through the night. On the 3rd morning, he met Walt. Walt was a wiry man with silver hair and a missing tooth, sitting on the front step, smoking a rolled cigarette. "You're new," he said. Henry nodded. "You look like you used to be somebody." Henry laughed once, dry and hoarse. "Used to build houses." "No kidding. I used to sell insurance." "Life's funny, huh?" "Funny's one word for it." They sat there a while, not saying much, just watching the snow melt on the curb, 2 old men sharing the kind of silence that didn't need fixing. By the end of the week, Henry was volunteering in the kitchen, washing dishes, peeling potatoes, fixing a loose hinge on the back pantry door. The staff liked him. He was quiet, reliable, didn't ask for much, just worked. "Have you thought about applying for senior housing?" Doris asked one day. "I don't know where to start." "I do," she said, and handed him a clipboard. 2 months passed, then 3. He moved to a temporary apartment, government-funded, small, but clean. A kitchenette, a mattress, a window that looked out over a parking lot. He bought a second-hand radio and listened to baseball games like he used to. Started walking in the mornings, even if his knees protested. He didn't hear from Caroline. Not once. But Maddie sent a postcard. It was a picture of a sunflower field with a crayon drawing of 2 people holding hands, one big, one small. On the back, in childish handwriting, "I miss you. Are you warm now? Love, Maddie." Henry kept it on the fridge, held in place with a chipped magnet shaped like a pear. One Friday, Walt showed up at his door. "Got something you might want to see," he said, grinning. They walked down the block to a community center where the local church was hosting a repair day. Broken toasters, busted lamps, chairs with one leg missing. Henry rolled up his sleeves and didn't stop for 5 hours. People thanked him, smiled, told him they didn't think that old lamp could be saved. He shrugged, modest. He didn't say it, but his hands remembered everything. That night, Doris called. "Heard you were the hero of repair day." He chuckled. "Just screws and glue." "No," she said. "It's dignity, and you're giving it back to people." Henry started going every week. He taught a boy how to hammer a nail straight. He fixed a woman's sewing machine that hadn't worked since her husband died. He even repaired a piano bench for a small girl who refused to let go of his hand afterward. By spring, the center offered him a part-time stipend. Small but steady. Then, in June, Caroline called. He let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hi, Dad." "Hello." A long pause. "I heard you moved into senior housing." I should have called earlier." "Yes." Another pause. "The kids miss you." "I miss them too. We were wondering if maybe you wanted to come for Maddie's recital. She's been asking for you." Henry's voice was calm. "Will I be staying in the garage again?" Silence. Then, No, you'd have the guest room." He waited. "Jim's mom passed," she added. "There's space now." "I see." She cleared her throat. "I know I hurt you." "Yes. I'm sorry." Henry looked out the window. The light was golden. The world was quiet. "Thank you," he said. Then, softly, "I'll think about it." That night, he pulled out the photo of Marla. "Can you believe it?" he whispered. She remembered, "I'm not a toolbox." He smiled. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't a sad one. Henry didn't sleep much the night before the recital. He wasn't nervous, not exactly. But something inside him was restless. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding Maddie's postcard in his hands like it was something sacred. The little drawing, the misspelled words, it reminded him that even if he'd been forgotten for a while, he hadn't been erased. Not entirely. He packed carefully: slacks, a clean shirt, a tie Marla had given him years ago, navy with small silver dots. The fabric still held the faintest scent of cedar from her old dresser. Walt knocked on the door just as he was about to leave. "You sure you're up for this?" he asked. Henry chuckled. "I've fixed toasters tougher than this." "Yeah, but toasters don't cry and call you Dad." They both laughed. Henry nodded. "I'll be fine." Caroline's house looked the same. Green siding, white trim. The garden bed out front was blooming now, bright tulips and early roses swaying in the wind. But something about it felt smaller. He rang the doorbell. It was Jim who answered. For a second, they just stared at each other. Then Jim said, "Come in, Henry." No apology, but no coldness either. Caroline came down the stairs a moment later. Her eyes looked tired. Older. She gave him a brief hug that felt stiff and practiced. "The kids are getting ready," she said. "They'll be thrilled." Henry nodded. "That's good." At the recital, Henry sat in the 3rd row. Maddie spotted him as soon as she came out. Her face lit up, and she waved so hard she nearly knocked over her music stand. He smiled, heart swelling. When she played a soft, unsure version of Claire de Lune, his eyes stung. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Afterward, she ran to him in the crowd, hugging him so tight he thought his ribs might crack. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "I told Mom you would." Henry held her close. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." That evening, they had dinner together. A real dinner. At the table, plates and silverware and conversation. It was awkward at first. Jim talked about work. Caroline passed dishes like she didn't know where to look. But the kids carried the weight. Maddie told stories about school. Caleb asked questions about the tools Henry used at the repair center. For the first time, Henry felt like a guest. A welcome one. Not an afterthought. Not a burden. Later, Caroline found him on the back porch, sitting on the swing. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. Henry looked up. "Thanks for inviting me." She hesitated. "I was scared to ask." "Of what? That you'd say no? Or that you'd say yes, but never really forgive me?" Henry rocked slowly. "I don't think it's about forgiveness, Caroline. Not really. It's about remembering how we treat the people who raised us, even when we think we're too busy to notice." She sat beside him. Her eyes were glassy. "I thought I was doing okay, balancing it all. And then, I started seeing your empty chair at dinner, and I realized how much space you actually filled." Henry smiled faintly. "Sometimes we don't know what we're holding together until it's gone." "I know now," she said, voice cracking. They sat in silence, watching the light fade from the sky. That night, Henry slept in the guest room. Clean sheets, a warm comforter, a soft pillow. He didn't cry, but he let himself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in what felt like years. The next morning, Caleb knocked on the door at 7 a.m. "Want to come to my soccer game?" Henry smiled, pulling on his sweater. Wouldn't miss it. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Caroline called more often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask about a recipe or what kind of wood filler to use on a crack in the dining table. Jim even stopped by the community center once, not to drop off Henry, but to help him carry a heavy cabinet back to the truck. At first, Henry didn't know what to make of it. But Walt said it best over coffee one morning. People mess up, sure, but if they're still showing up, even clumsily, that counts. One day in late August, Caroline surprised Henry by showing up at the center during repair day. "I brought something," she said, lifting a cardboard box. Inside were picture frames. Dozens of them. Old, scratched, some with broken glass. "These were in the garage," she said. "I figured. Maybe you could help me fix them." He lifted one and smiled. "I'd be honored." One of the frames held a picture of him and Marla, laughing on a beach. Henry stared at it a long time. "I forgot we even had this," Caroline murmured. "You look happy." "I was." He touched the corner, brushing off the dust. "I think I could be again," he said. By fall, Henry was teaching a weekly workshop at the center, Fix It Friday, they called it. He wore an apron with his name embroidered on the pocket, a gift from the kids. He was no longer just passing through. He was home, not in a building, but in a rhythm, in the hands that reached out, in the voices that called his name and meant it. One crisp October morning, Henry sat on his porch, coffee steaming in his hand. The postcard from Maddie still hung on his fridge, but now it had company photos from the recital, a birthday card from Walt, a thank you note from a stranger whose radio he'd fixed. The world hadn't gotten easier. But he had. He'd bent, not broken. Sometimes he still thought about the garage. About that first night, the silence, the cold. It reminded him what people are capable of. But more than that, it reminded him what people can come back from. Because warmth isn't just heat. It's memory. It's presence. It's the quiet miracle of someone changing their mind and their heart. A few weeks after the picture frame repair, Henry received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, neat cursive, the kind that had nearly disappeared from the world. He recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Lyle, his brother. They hadn't spoken since the funeral. Not Marla's, but their mother's, over 15 years ago. Time had twisted their pride into silence. Henry opened it slowly. "Heard from an old neighbor that you were living downstate. Hope this finds you well. Didn't realize how far we drifted until the holidays passed, and I didn't know where to send a card. If you ever feel like talking or fishing, the river's still here. So am I." Henry stared at the note for a long time. His hands trembled slightly, but not from age. From something else, a longing so deep it had gone unnamed. He folded the letter carefully, tucked it into the same envelope that held Maddie's postcard. The fall festival at the community center was Henry's idea. "Let's host a Fix-It booth," he told Doris. "People bring things, we patch them up. Kids can learn to use tools safely. I'll draw up a plan." Doris raised an eyebrow. "You sound like a man with too much time and a power drill." Henry grinned. Guilty on both counts. They made flyers. Walt brought paint. A local hardware store donated screws, pliers, sandpaper. By the end of the week, Henry had set up 5 small tables with benches and toolkits. On the morning of the festival, the air buzzed with music and barbecue smoke. Children ran between hay bales and balloon stands. And there, under a hand-painted banner that read, "People came in waves." A young mother brought a wooden rocking horse, her father's one leg broken. A teenager with a broken cassette player he called retro cool. An old man with nothing to fix who just wanted to talk about model trains. And they came, and they watched, and they stayed. Caroline showed up, too, with Jim and the kids. At first, they just hovered. Then Maddie picked up a screwdriver and started helping. Caleb hammered a loose wool back onto a toy truck. Jim laughed, not the nervous chuckle Henry remembered, but a real laugh when the light bulb flickered to life in a broken lamp. And Caroline, she just watched Henry, her arms folded, eyes glassy again. Later, as the sun began to dip, she said, "I didn't know you had this in you." Henry smiled. "I always did. I just didn't have the room to share it for a while." She nodded. "Well, it's yours now." That night, after everyone left, Henry stayed behind to sweep the floor. Walt brought him a beer and a folding chair. "You look like a king out there," Walt said. "Like you belonged." Henry leaned back, stared up at the string lights still glowing above them. "I did," he said softly. "For the first time in years, I really did." Thanksgiving approached. Caroline called and asked him, no hesitation this time, if he would join them. "I'll cook the turkey," she offered. Henry chuckled. "I'll bring the pies." "Grandpa's bringing pies?" Caleb shouted in the background. Only if you promise to help eat them, Henry replied. That Thursday, he arrived with 2 pumpkin pies homemade and 1 tiny apple tart Maddie had made at school. Her handwriting was on the crust in cinnamon sugar. Love you, Grandpa. He took off his coat, and for the first time since Marla died, he hung it on a hook not over a chair, not draped across his lap like armor, but neatly, like someone who belonged. The dining table was set with the good plates. There were candles, napkins, laughter. At one point, Caroline stood and raised her glass. I just want to say, she paused, looking at her father, that sometimes we learn what matters too late. But I'm grateful it's not too late. Not for us. Henry felt the tears threaten, but he didn't let them fall. Instead, he raised his glass, too, to second chances, and to not giving up on each other even when we forget how to hold on. Glasses clinked. The warmth in the room had nothing to do with the heater. That night, Henry helped Maddie carry the dishes to the sink. You don't have to do that, Caroline said. I want to, he replied. He rinsed the pie plates with steady hands, careful not to chip the edges. Afterward, he stepped onto the porch with Jim. They stood in silence for a while, the cold air soft against their faces. I was wrong, Jim finally said. Back then, about the garage, about all of it. Henry nodded. I know. They didn't say more. But that was enough. Before bed, Maddie handed him a small, wrapped box. It's not Christmas yet, he teased. She shrugged. I wanted to give it to you now. Inside was a hand-drawn coupon book. 1 hug. 1 story. 1 help Grandpa with tools day. Unlimited I love yous. Henry couldn't speak. He just pulled her in close, whispering, You're the best part of me I didn't know I'd left behind. Later, lying in the guest room, he stared at the ceiling. The room wasn't cold. The bed didn't creak. The silence wasn't empty. He was still an old man. Still a widower. Still someone who'd once been left in a garage. But now he was something else too. He was a grandfather. A father again. A friend. A builder of more than just walls, a restorer of bridges, of time, of meaning. The next morning, as he packed his things, Caroline knocked. You don't have to go yet, she said. I know. She hesitated. You could stay? For a while? Or longer? He looked around the room, the clean sheets, the family photos now placed on the dresser, a folded towel already laid out for him in the bathroom. He smiled. I will. The leaves had turned again, burnt orange and deep crimson. October was always Marla's favorite month. She used to say the world looked honest in fall, no frills, no lies, just beauty and decay coexisting like old friends. Henry sat at the wooden bench outside the community center, sipping hot cider from a paper cup. The Fix-It Friday sign was a little faded now, but the spirit behind it had never been stronger. The workshop had grown. Kids came after school. Retired teachers. Single moms. Even local college students looking to learn something real. Walt still showed up, usually with donuts and a sarcastic comment. Today was special. Today was their first Generations Day, an idea Henry had scribbled into a notebook one quiet night. It was simple. For one afternoon, elders paired with kids from local schools. They'd fix, tinker, or build something together. But more than that, they'd talk. Share. Listen. The community had shown up in numbers Henry never expected. A boy no older than 8 sat with a woman in her 70s, figuring out how to restring a wind chime. A teenage girl painted a broken stool beside a retired mechanic. There was music, laughter, the kind of warmth that didn't come from heaters. Caroline arrived late that afternoon. She brought apple pie. Maddie carried a pitcher of lemonade. It was a birdhouse, a little crooked, nails sticking out, but full of heart. Henry beamed. Looks like bluebirds will have a palace. Caleb beamed back. Can you help me hang it? They found a tree just past the tool shed. As Henry handed the hammer to his grandson, he thought about how far he'd come from that night in the garage. Later that evening, after the festival had ended and most had gone home, Henry stood alone in the workshop. He walked to the back corner where he kept his own project, something he'd worked on in small pieces between helping others. It was a bench, but not just any bench. The backrest was carved with small, careful letters. Warmth is something we choose to give. He hadn't told anyone about it yet, but now he thought maybe it was time. The following weekend, they held a small ceremony. The bench was placed beneath a large oak tree in the community garden. Doris gave a short speech. Walt handed Henry a plaque with his name on it spelled wrong, as a joke. They all laughed. They all knew. And when Henry sat down, everyone clapped not because it was grand, but because it was earned. As winter approached, Henry's health slowed. His hands, though steady, were weaker. His walks became shorter, but his smile remained, that same quiet strength in his eyes. One afternoon, he asked Caroline to drive him back to his old town. Just once. She didn't ask questions, just packed a thermos and a blanket and drove. They passed the street where his house once stood, now painted blue, with a new family inside. He didn't feel bitterness. He felt relief. Let it live again, he thought. Let it be someone's warmth now. They stopped by the river where he and La used to fish. Caroline helped him to a bench. I wish I had asked more, she said, breaking the silence. About you. About Mom. About your life before we all got too busy. Henry touched her hand. You're asking now? That's what counts. She cried quietly, not from guilt, but from grace. From the ache of knowing you almost missed something precious, but didn't. In the spring, Henry began writing letters. Not out of urgency, but clarity. He wrote one to Maddie telling her that creativity was a kind of courage. That music and cookies and laughter could fix more than she thought. One to Caleb reminding him to keep building, even when the world broke things faster than he could hammer them back together. One to Walt full of terrible jokes and a drawing of a broken toaster with angel wings. And one to Caroline. He kept that one folded in his pocket for weeks before leaving it on her kitchen counter one morning. He died on a warm Sunday, in his sleep. Peacefully, quietly, not in a garage, but in his own bed, surrounded by photos, sunlight, and the soft smell of sawdust. At the memorial, they played music, not hymns, but the sound of wind chimes and guitar. Dozens of people came. From the community center, the shelter, children who were now grown, neighbors he'd helped, strangers who'd once come for a repair and left with something mended inside themselves. Caroline read from his letter. Time isn't a race. It's a rhythm. And even when we miss a beat, we can still find the melody again. I forgive you. Please forgive me, too. And keep going because love is always worth the repair. Weeks later, someone placed a small plaque beside the bench under the oak tree. It read, Henry Rivers, builder, father, grandfather, fixer of things that matter most. And from then on, whenever someone sat there to rest, or remember, or just to breathe, they were warmed not by wood or sunlight, but by the quiet echo of someone who knew. Love doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to stay.